So in this video, I'll be going through the June 2020 higher paper 2. Let's make a start. Question 1, write 84 as a product of its prime factors. So hopefully the 8 and the 4, you can see they're both going to go into the 4 times table. So that's going to be 4, that's going to be 2 and a 1, that's 7, 3, and that is 2, 2. So we can write that as 2 squared times 3 times 7. Part B, find the lowest common multiple of 60 and 84. So we can list out some timetables for these. So that's going to be 168. We can use a calculator for this. So just keep typing some numbers. I started with the 84 because I know the 6 times table. And I can see in the 6 times table that occurs. So we can write that as 420 because 6 times 7 is 42. So in that case, 60 times 70 will give us 420. So coming on to question 2 now. We have a universal set. A are even numbers, B are factors of 10. So even numbers, if I just put a blue dot above them, they'll be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I'll just put a blue dot here as well. And with factors of 10, I'll put a green dot here. That's going to be 10. So any number that's divisible by 10 and doesn't leave a remainder, that will also be 5. That will also be 2. And that will also be 1. Okay, so now if I work through these, if I start with the first number, which is 1, the 1 will end up in B. So you can cross that off. Now the next number appears in both A and B because it's got a blue dot and a green dot. The 3 doesn't appear in any, so we can put that outside here. The 4 only is an even number, so it'll appear in here. The 5 will appear only in here. The 6 will appear only in here. The 7 appears outside. So does the 9. That leaves us with 8 here and a 10 here as well. So yeah, just work through them, cross them all off. So that is what we're left with. And the next question asks the probability that it's A and B. So that's everything that's inside the center. So that's 2 out of a possible of 10, which is 1/5. Question 3. Connor puts tins into small boxes and large boxes. He puts 6 tins into each small box, 20 tins into each large box. He puts a total of 3,000 tins into that. The number of tins in small boxes to the number of tins in large boxes. So you have small to large number of tins is in the ratio 2 to 3, which adds up to 5. We know that he puts a total of 3,000. So you're going to have then 2x plus 3x. So we need to find the ratio that gives us 3,000. So we can write that as this. 2x plus 3x is equal to 3,000. We can write that 5x is equal to 3,000. And we can get x is equal to 6. And now we can sub that x into here. And that gives us 12 to 18. And it won't be 6, sorry. It's 5 times 3 is 6. It'll be 600. So I'll add 2 zeros onto here. So now this ratio is 2 to 3. And this gives us 3,000. So this will total up to 3,000. Right, so now that we have this, so these are the number of tins. But we know in the small boxes has 6 tins. And the large box has 20 tins each. So if I divide this by 6, that means we need 200 small boxes. And if I divide this by 20, that means I need 90 large boxes. Now the question is asking, there's less than 30% of the boxes are large. So large is going to be 90 out of a total of 200 plus 90. Times that by 100 since it's percentage. Type that into your calculator and you get 31.03. So he's not correct. So we're going to write a little statement that says no. More than 30% boxes filled with tins are large. Moving on to question 4. We have complete the table. We have y is equal to 5x minus cubed. Again, we can sub these into a calculator. As just one thing to bear in mind with negative numbers, make sure you are using brackets. So the value of x sits in there. So if it's -2, you'd put -2 in there. You'd still have the minus outside as well. So when you do type that into your calculator, you end up with 13, 6 is given, 5, 4, and -3. And then I'm going to plot that on a graph, so -2 and 13. So that's going to be somewhere in the middle there. So you want to be as accurate as you can. That's -1 and 6. We have 0 and 5, 1 and 4, and 2 and -3. And we're going to join that together with a nice smooth curve. So there we go. Moving on to question 5. Find the value of x. So we can use, so that's going to be the opposite. That's going to be the hypotenuse. That's going to be the adjacent. Now you can see we know nothing about the adjacent and we're not interested in that. So that leaves us with O and H. So that's going to be sine 34 is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. And x is going to be 178 times sine 34, which leaves us with x is equal to, type that into your calculator, hit enter, and to one decimal place, that is 99.5. Moving on to question 6. So we can write this as 2 bracket 3, 4 minus 3 bracket 5 minus 2. Now you want to just take care with the negatives here when expanding out. So that's going to become 6, 8, and we're going to multiply it with the 3 first, leave the minus outside. So that's 15 and -6. So that's going to become 6 minus 15 at the top and 8 minus -6 at the bottom. Again, you can use your calculator for this. I would recommend it since it's a calculator paper. That's -9 over 14. Moving on to question 7. It wants us to work out the area of the quarter circle. So the quarter circle, just to get my pen out, is that bit there. So let's just start off with some basic things about circles. So we know with a circle that the area is pi r squared. Now this is a quarter circle, so it's going to be 1/4 pi r squared. Radius is going to be that there and that there. Now we don't know what the radius is, but what we do have next to this quarter circle is this shape here. And hopefully you can notice we have this, and we can square them and take them away using Pythagoras theorem to get r. So in this case, 9 squared minus 6 squared is equal to r squared. So that means 45 is equal to r squared. We can leave it at that because over here, notice we just need r squared. So that is going to become 1/4 times pi times 45. Type that into your calculator, and to 3 significant figures, that becomes 35.3 meters. Moving on to question 8. So Tariq buys a laptop, he gets 5% off the normal price. Now price is normally 100%. He gets 5% off, so he pays 95%. We want to work out the original price. So if 99% is 551, we can work out 1%, divide each side by 95. And that's £5.80, times that by 100, and 100% is 580. So that's how much you must have paid. So just to write that down, that's what we've done then. Here we've times it by 100. So we have Joan invests £6,000 in a saving account. In year 1, he gets 2.4%. In year 2, for the next 2 years, he gets 1.7% because he pays over 3 years. So just one thing to bear in mind here, but again, percentages are out of 100, so this will become 102.4%. And as a decimal, you're going to hop the decimal 2 to the left. Careful with these here. Again, percentages out of 100, this becomes 101.7%, and as a decimal, that's 1.017. So if you look at the first bit, which is year 1, so that is going to be 6,000 times 1.024, which gives us 6,144. If I then look at year 2, that's going to be, well, year 2 and 3. So that'll be both. So that'll be what he's left with at the end of year 1, times that by 1.017, and this time it's squared because it's the 2 years, so that's going to be £6,354.67. Moving on to question 9. So some heights have been recorded in a table, and then she's plotted that into a box plot, and we need to find 2 things that are wrong with it. So first things first, we can start with the top. So the least height 142, that looks right to me. The lower quartile 154, that looks right to me. I should also say that each of these squares goes up by 1, so just worth bearing that in mind. Now, I've got the interquartile range, and I can use this to work out the upper quartile. So if I do 154 plus 17, I'll get 171. So the upper quartile, and I can see there's a mistake there. So already I can see the upper quartile is 171 centimeters, but plotted at 172 centimeters. And the second thing that's wrong, the median is 162, and it's plotted at 161. So median is 162 centimeters, but plotted at 161 centimeters. Moving on to question 10, anything to the power of 0 is 1. With B, you just want to note the fact that this and this look the same. So if I was to write this out, x minus 4, and then I do x minus 4. And the fact that it simplifies kind of a hint anyway, and you can cancel these two out, and you're left with 8 over x minus 4. Now with the next one, simplify. So we've got the cube outside, we're going to bring the power in, so that's going to become 3 cubed. N is going to be 4 times 3, which is 12. And w squared is going to be 2 times 3, which is 6. Now careful with this question, you do need to write that out as a value. So that's 3 times 3, which is 9. And 9 times 3, which is 27. And write the rest out as it is. So that is N12. Let me just write that a bit clearly. And W6. So Jack is in a restaurant. There are 5 starters, 8 main courses, and some desserts. We'll call that X. We don't know how many. He's saying there's 240 ways he can choose a starter, main, and a dessert. Could he be correct? So we have 5 times 8 times X is equal to 240. We have 40x is equal to 240, and then we have x is equal to 6. Yes. Now, it's yes because if that was an odd number, then it'll be incorrect. And because it's an even number, yes, he can be correct. He can be correct. So what we're actually checking here is that this is a whole number. If it was 5.4, you can't have 5.4 desserts, right? So because it's a whole number, that is correct. So now moving on to the next question. Question 12, find the gradient of the graph. Now with this, you want to pick nice and easy points. The points that I chose to work out, because essentially what you have is you have a line and then you work out 2 points, and then you get y, and then you get x, and you figure out what the gradient is. And the points I chose were just that one there, because it's really easy to read off, and that one there, because it's really easy to read off. So in this case, that point there is 27, and that point there is 300. So change in y is 27, change in x is 300, which gives you 0.09. And it's a negative because the line is going down. That's where the negative came from. So it says, interpret what the gradient represents. So if you read the question, it says, the volume of litres of petrol in his car. So it's showing the volume of petrol used per kilometre. So volume of petrol used per kilometre. Moving on to question 13. So whenever you have any sort of shapes or any triangles or whatever, see what you can work out without, like I haven't even read the question properly yet, but I can already see, I know what that angle there is going to be because I can add them two together. That's 50, 60, and 60 take away 180. So if I do 180, essentially what I'm doing is 180, take away the other two angles, take away 34, take away 26, and that gives me 120. I don't know why I'll need it, but there's no harm in putting that there. So they want me to work out the length AB. So in this case, we're going to use the sine rule. So that's going to be, we'll call this C, I'll call this A. So essentially it'll be something along the lines of, we're trying to find the side out, so it'll be A over sine A is equal to C over sine C. And you can already see how that angle's helped us out anyway. So just to show you what we're looking at is that, and then we're looking at that and that there. So that then becomes A, which is 23.8, divide that by sine A, which is 120, and you can see where we needed the 120 now. But just a little tip, if you can work some angle out, it can always help you unplug some bit of information that can help you solve the question if you don't know where to start. So then we are left with C, which is equal to sine 34 times 23.8 over sine 120, and type that into your calculator and you get 15.4 to 1 decimal place. Moving on to question 14. So we've been given two shapes and they're both squares. So we know both the length and the height are going to be the same. So we can call this X and this x, and we've been told that this has a length which is 4 greater than the length of A, and we've been told that the area of B is the area of A plus 70, so that's that line there. So in terms of splitting this, if you look at it as A and B, so we know that the area is going to be x times x, which is x squared, and we know the area here is going to be x plus 4 times x plus 4, and that can be written as x squared plus 8x plus 16. And now we know that this is equal, the area of B is equal to the area of A plus 70. And where did I get this from? What it says in the question there. So we now know these two are equal. What we can now do is simplify it. So I can take away x squared from each side. That leaves me with 70 is equal to 8x plus 16. I can take away 16 from each side, and that leaves me with 8x is equal to 8x is equal to 54. And then type that into your calculator and you get x is equal to 6.75. And now the question's asking for the area of square B. So the area of square B, we can just use that equation up there. So that's going to be x plus 4, 6.75 plus 4, and that all squared. And that gives us 116 to 3 significant figures. Question 15, describe fully the transformation from A to B. So the first thing to know is on this really is the fact that this is 2 in terms of the width and the height. This is 3. So we can see it's been multiplied by 1.5. So there is a scale factor of 1.5, and it looks like it's a negative 1.5 because the shape's been inverted. And we just need to find the center. So I'm going to start with looking at, well, actually, I'll start with looking at this point. And where does that point sit? On here, it sits there. So we're going to look at them 2 points, draw a line between them. We just get that straight. And then I'll look at this point and this point. And if I draw a line between them 2, I don't need to look at the last point up here because it lies in the same path. So I can see that the center is going to be 1, 1. So describe fully the transformation. So it's been enlarged by a scale factor . Scale factor of 1.5 with a center 1, 1. Moving on to question 16. Here's the first 5 terms of a quadratic sequence. So in terms of a quadratic sequence, you need to understand why we do some of the stuff we do. So a quadratic formula is written as, not the quadratic formula, a quadratic is written in the form an squared plus bn plus c. Now if I was to substitute 1 into there to get the first, so for example, this is the first term in the sequence, this is the second, this is the third, this is the fourth. So if I was to sub 1 into this quadratic I've written here, an squared plus bn plus c, that would look as a plus b plus c. If I now sub 2 into there, that would become 4a plus 2b plus c. And if I was to sub 3 into there, that would become 9a plus 3b plus c. Now if I find the difference between the first 2 and the second 2, that would be 3a plus b, and this would be 5a plus b. And if I find the difference between these two, that would be 2a. And as a sequence, that's 10, 21, 38. And if I find the difference between these two, that's 11. And the difference between these two is 17. And you'll see in a second why I've done this. So you can actually see how the quadratic formula works. And if I use the right color there, that is going to be 6. So if I start with looking at this and this, I can see that 2a, I'll do that here, 2a is equal to 6, which means a is equal to 3. So we now know what a is. If I then pick something on the line above, so you can pick whichever one you want, but I'm going to stick with the left 2. You could have gone with 5a plus b is equal to 17, but I'm going to go with these two. So that is going to be, I'll draw a line here. So I'll do 3a plus b is equal to 11. I know what a is because I figured it out over here. So that's going to be 3 times 3, which is 9, plus b is 11. So b is going to be equal to 2. And then finally, if I just go 1 up again, use a different color, I'm going to compare that with that. So that is going to become a plus b plus c is equal to 10. I know what a is. I also now know what b is. Plus c is equal to 10. So we have 5 plus c is equal to 10. So c is going to be 5. And now I'm going to substitute all of that into this up here. So that is going to become an squared, which is going to be 3n squared, plus bn, and now b is 2, plus c, which is 5. Write down the coordinates of the turning point. So we're just going to make this 0, this bracket here. To make that 0, we're going to make x minus 12, and that leaves us with y as minus 7. Question 18. So we have a cone in the diagram. The top bit is painted grey. They want us to work out the area of the bit that is not painted in grey. Again, looking at this question, I don't know when I'll need it, but I know this is 15 because I can just do 10 minus 15 to work out that bit there. Okay, so we have the full cone and a bit shaded, and they want us to find the bit that's unshaded. Right, so in terms of this cone, so if you have the full cone drawn like so, and then we have the grey bit, I'll use a darker colour for that. So if you have the grey bit that's painted there, I should probably draw this a little bit bigger. So that's the grey bit that's painted, and then there's like this bit at the bottom. Now the reason I've drawn this is in order to work out the surface area of the unshaded bit, which is this blue bit here, we're first going to have to find the surface area of the full cone, then find the surface area of the grey bit, then subtract the two, and that will then give us this bit here, and that's what we're trying to find. So if I write that out as they only want us to find, also worth noting, they only want the curved area. So we don't need to worry about the bit underneath the cone, which is the circle. So the curved surface area only. That's not painted. So if I go with full cone, they've kindly given us the surface area equation there. So the surface area is equal to pi RL. So we know the diameter is 20, so the radius is going to be 10. So that's going to be pi 10 times length, which is 25, which is 250 pi. Also, the question says give your answer as a multiple of pi, so we're going to leave that there. And now we've done this bit here. We can tick that off. And now we just need to find this bit here. So then we can subtract them two and work out the blue bit. So now I'll call this the grey area. So that's the top cone. So the surface area again is going to be pi RL, so pi times the radius. Right, so we don't have the radius. Okay, so we need this bit here. Okay, I'll leave that as R, and then L, I've figured that out as 15. Okay, so we need the radius on this. I'm just having a think about how we would get the radius. So yeah, it's almost like, so we have the full cone, which is that's 20, and the side's 25. And then we have the grey cone, where that's what I'm trying to find, but I know the side's 15. And we can use similar shapes here, because it's one shape stacked on top of another. So in order for me to go from here to here, I'm going to be dividing it by 5 over 3. So for me to go from here to here, I can also divide by 5 over 3. So the radius then becomes 20 divided by 5 over 3, which is 6. So that's going to become pi times 6 times 15, which is 90 pi. Okay, and now finally the curved surface area of the missing bit, we're going to subtract the two, so that's 250 pi minus 90 pi, which gives us 160 pi. Moving on to question 19, we have a hot air balloon descending. Now with this question, you have to read it very, very carefully. So the height of the balloon n minutes after it starts to descend. So after it starts to descend is this. The height of the balloon n plus 1 minutes. So when it starts to descend, it's hn. And then when it's be in a few minutes we use this formula here. So if you read this line here, it tells us the balloon starts to descend, so H0, and that's at 9:15. So it starts to descend, so that is going to be 1200. And then at 9:16, it's reached 1040. We're going to use that equation now because it's been n plus 1 minutes afterwards. So we're going to start using this equation now for 9:16, and that is going to be k times hn, which is h0, 1200, plus 20. So this is for h1 when n is 0. And now we can rearrange this equation, subtract 20 from each side, and we're left with 1020 is equal to 1200 k, and that gives us k as 0.85. And now if we move on to 917, so that will be h2. So we're going to use the value from, well, we don't know what h2 is, so we're going to say h2 is equal to 0.85 times h1, which is that value there, 1040, plus 20, and that becomes 904. And then at 9:18 we have h3, and h3 is equal to 0.85, which is k, times 904 plus 20, and that's 788.4. And if that was a little bit confusing, just to write the formula next to this, so this is going to be h n plus 1. So in this case, n, that's h1, which is k, since n is 0, so that's going to be h0 plus 20. So you can see now where the h0 came from. And then in the next one, n is now there, so that we have h2. So n is 1, so essentially this is n. You can see that n is 0, n is now 1, and n is now 2. So when n is 1, we have k times h1 plus 20, and the h1 then comes from there. And then here we have h3 is equal to k times h2 plus 20, and the h2 is there, which is that value there. So moving on to question 20, there's only red sweets and yellow sweets in a bag. There's n red and 8 yellow. So show why the probability that there's red sweets can't be 7 over 10. So the probability that there's red is going to be n over n plus 8, so that's the total. So if we write 7 over 10 is the probability that they're red is equal to n plus 8. If you try to solve this for n, and again, the proof that we're trying to do here is if n is a decimal number, then it can't be true. So for example, so we can't have 2.3 sweets. So if I was to rearrange this and solve it, that would become 7n plus 8 is equal to 10n, which becomes 7n plus 56 is equal to 10n, which then becomes 3n is equal to 56. And then we have n, type that into your calculator, 18.667, and then you can write, you cannot have a decimal number of sweets. So after he's taken the first sweet from the bag and eaten it, that's the key bit here, he's eaten it, so he's not putting it back in. So given the probability that both sweets are red is 3 over 5, work out the number of red sweets. So if I was to draw the tree here, so he's either going to take a red or he's going to take a yellow. The probability that he takes a red is going to be n over n plus 8. Now if he's taken a red and eaten it, then we're going to have one less, so that's going to be n minus 1 over the total, which is still n plus 8 for red, and for yellow it remains unchanged, so I should write that here. Yellow is 8 over n plus 8, so that'll be 8 over n plus 8. But it won't be plus 8 actually, because he's eaten 1, so we'll take 1 off the total as well. That'll be minus 1, and that becomes 7. Because we're minusing 1 top and bottom. But if he's taken a yellow, well, we don't really need to worry about the yellow, because the question's only asking for red and red. So in that case, if you've taken a red and red, that means n over n plus 8 times n minus 1 over n plus 7 is equal to 3 over 5. And now we're going to expand this out. So if we multiply them across, that's going to be that. And that is going to be written as n plus 8 over n plus 7 is equal to 3 over 5. And that's written as n squared minus n over n squared plus 15n plus 56, which is equal to 3 over 5. And then that, and now we can move the 5 up there, and we can move the 3 up there. And then that becomes 5n squared minus 5n is equal to 3n squared plus 45n plus 168. And now we can add 5n to each side. That will make that 50n. And we can also take away 5n squared from each side. So that leaves me with minus 2n squared plus 50n plus 168 is equal to 0. Now we can use the quadratic formula here, and we are allowed to use calculators on this. So that's A, B, C. So if I write out the quadratic formula just down here, well, in this case, we'll only be interested in plus, because we can't have a negative number of streets. So if you sub in the values for A, B, and C in there, just taking care with the negatives. So actually, I will write this one out, because that's going to be minus 50 plus root 50 squared minus 4 brackets for the negative 2, 168 all over 2 times negative 2, and that gives you 28. So there's 28 red sweets. So we have a graph, and they want us to sketch the inverse of this graph, so the negative. So we're just going to reflect this in the y-axis. So the first point is there. The second point is going to be 1 across 2. Third point looks like it's down there. And the final one is there. And all I've done is I've essentially just reflected the graph in the y-axis. Of course, drawing a bit better than that, but it's a little bit hard to draw on. Actually, I'll try to do a slight better job. So we have been given a curve, and they're asking us to show how it's gone from C to S. So you can see it's moved to the right by 3. This is where you want to be careful, because it's moved to the right by 3. You might be tempted to write plus 3 in the final equation. It's not plus 3. So for example, if the curve C is f of x, the curve S is going to be f of x minus 3. And it can be a bit tricky when you first see this, but it is a negative. So coming into here, we have the equation for C. It's written as y is equal to f plus 2x minus x squared. So it's going to be x minus 3. So we're just going to sub that in wherever we see an x. So the x becomes an x minus 3. And the same here. Remember the squared. And that is your answer to this question. And the final question, C is a circle with a center at the origin. So remember, at the origin just means it's at 0, 0. It's got a tangent that passes through the point minus 20 and 0, 10. Work out the equation for C. So C is a circle. So you want to remember the equation of a circle is y squared plus x squared is equal to r squared, because it's saying equation for C, C is a circle. So if you start off by actually drawing this, so we can actually start to visualize something. So if I draw a line there, just make sure it's at 90 degrees. And let's just say that point there is a 10. That point there is a negative 20. I'm getting that from there and there. Trying to plot this line. And if I just plot this line now, as straight as I can. And then this is the tangent to a circle. So if I just draw my circle as a tangent to that. Nope. Let me just try one last time. Nice. He should be a little bit more central and look a bit more like this. So I wonder if I can expand this. So I can. I'll just have to move this line. But actually, that will do. That will do. I'm just going to see if I can expand this a bit. But yeah, so there we go. That is good enough. So we have this, and in order to write this equation, we really just need the value of r, the radius. So if I draw a line in a different color, the radius is that there. We know the tangent meets the radius at 90 degrees. Right, so we have bits of information. Let's start with this line that's passing through. So the green line, so I just write the straight line. So we have a green line, and we want to work out the equation for it. So y is equal to mx plus c. So again, with this, we're going to work out different bits that we can, and then we're going to see how we can piece the bits together to get the final answer that we need. So we can start off by finding the equation of this line. We know the 2 points it passes through, and we can use that to find the gradient. So remember, the gradient is just the run and the rise. So we know it goes up by 10. We know it goes across by 20. So that is going to become 10 over 20. So the gradient m is going to be 10 over 20, which is a half. We now have the gradient of that line. Now, since this line is a tangent to the radius, we know that m1 times m2, which is when you multiply two perpendicular gradients together, ends up with -1. So that means m2 is going to be -2. So that is the gradient of the radius. So gradient of the radii. Okay, so we have the gradient of the radius there, and we have the gradient of the line, and now we can write an equation for that line. So for the line, we have y is equal to -1/2 x plus c. If I substitute the points, one of the points in, I'll substitute this one in because it's a bit easier to do. So that will be 10 is equal to 1/2 minus 1/2 times 0 plus c. So that means c is equal to 10. Well, you could see the off graph anyway where it was going to intercept. So I'm not sure why I did that, but that will then become y is equal to 1/2 minus 1/2. No, not minus 1/2, 1/2 x plus c. So that is the equation for that green line. And now if you look at the circle here, so the circle has, so for the radius, I shouldn't really write circle, I should write the blue radius line. So this is another line. Let's imagine it's a straight line, which it is. So the equation of this is y is equal to mx plus c. We know what the gradient is now. It's -2x plus c. We know the points it passes through because the question told us it passes through the origin. So if you sub in the 2 zeros, we end up with c is equal to 0. So the equation then becomes y is equal to -2x. So now we have this equation for the blue line, and we have the equation on the left for the green line. Now we can use these two equations to find this point right here. I'm going to color that in red. We can find the point that these two lines intersect each other. And if you're wondering why we need that, because once we found where that intersects, we can have this height here and this length here. And once we have them two lengths, we're essentially what we're left with is something that looks like this. And if I was just to draw that out on the side, we'll end up with this, and we'll have this height, and we'll have this length, and we'll need to work out the radius, and we can use Pythagoras. So once I have this coordinate up here, I can use the y and the x to work out the radius. So if I make these two equations equal to each other, to find the point of intersection, that would be 1/2 x plus 10 is equal to -2x. That will be 10 is equal to -2.5x, and that will be x is equal to -4. Now I know what x is, I can sub it into any of these two equations above, and that gives me y is equal to 8. So now I know what y is, and now I know what x is. So if I go up here, I can label that onto this diagram. So that is 8 there, and a -4 there. So that means this is 4, this is 8. So that means the radius is going to be 8 squared plus 4 squared. Well, we've now got the equation of the line, so that is going to be 4 squared plus 8 squared is equal to the radius squared. And if you do 8 squared plus 4 squared, let me just put in here, 8 squared is 64 plus 16, and that gives you 80. So r squared is equal to 80. But remember, the question asked for work out an equation of c, so that's going to be x squared plus y squared is equal to 80. So this was a slightly tricky question. So as always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.